Ethan's eyes opened slowly, his head pounding. A sharp, cold breeze hit his face, and he winced. His body felt stiff, and his mind was foggy. For a moment, he had no idea where he was. His spaceship, the Vanguard, had been on a routine mission to explore a distant system. The ship was supposed to be safe, but something had gone horribly wrong. He remembered an explosion, the feeling of weightlessness, and then nothing. Ethan sat up, trying to clear his head. The ground beneath him was uneven, hard, and cold. He glanced around, noticing the twisted metal of his ship scattered in pieces across a barren landscape. The sky above was an eerie shade of purple, with thick clouds swirling. His breath formed, visible clouds as he exhaled, and the air was thin, definitely not a place he wanted to be stranded. He struggled to stand, his legs weak, and his arms felt like jelly. The pain from the crash was beginning to set in. Ethan checked his suit. It was damaged, but nothing too serious. He reached for his communicator, but it was shattered, just like everything else around him. What happened? He muttered to himself, taking a deep breath. He needed to stay calm. As he surveyed the wreckage, a faint rustling sound came from behind him. Ethan spun around, ready to defend himself. His hand instinctively went to his weapon, but before he could draw it, he froze. Curled up beside a large piece of the ship's wreckage was a figure, a girl. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. She wasn't human. Her skin was a soft shade of light blue, almost translucent, and she had strange markings on her arms that seemed to glow faintly. Her long, silver hair spilled around her face like a waterfall, and her ears were slightly pointed, much like the legends he'd heard of alien species. Her eyes were closed, and she looked peaceful, despite the harsh environment around them. Ethan took a cautious step closer. She wasn't moving, and for a moment, he wondered if she was alive. "Hello?" Ethan called softly, trying not to startle her. He crouched down beside her. "Who are you?" she whispered. Her voice soft but clear. The words were foreign, but somehow Ethan understood them. "I'm Ethan," he replied slowly, trying to figure out if she could understand him. "I was in a crash. Where am I?" The girl didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat up and looked around, her expression a mix of curiosity and confusion. Her gaze seemed to linger on the wreckage of Ethan's ship for a long moment, and then she turned back to him. She didn't speak at first, just observed him with her eyes. You're human?" she asked, her tone uncertain. Ethan nodded, though he felt a little strange explaining it. "Yes, I am human. What about you? Are you alone?" She hesitated again, as though carefully considering her next words. Then she nodded, her long hair moving like silk. I am alone now. I was waiting. I thought I would not survive." She seemed to shrink into herself a little, as if the thought of survival scared her. Ethan's heart softened. She didn't seem dangerous, though he knew little about her species. Still, he couldn't help but feel a strange connection to her, something he couldn't quite explain. She looked fragile, vulnerable, and the fact that she was here, beside him, made him feel less alone. The girl's eyes moved toward the wreckage again. She seemed troubled by it, almost as if she was looking for something or someone. But there was no one else here. It was just the two of them. "I have to get back to my ship," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I can't stay here. I need to find a way to fix it. Do you know where we are?" The girl tilted her head slightly and then looked at the sky, as if pondering the question. "You are far from where you belong," she said softly. "This place is not a safe place, but it is warm here." She looked at him again, as if waiting for something. Ethan frowned. Her words were cryptic, and he didn't quite understand what she meant. Still, he knew he needed answers. The crash had left him with more questions than he had answers for, and now this mysterious alien girl was part of that equation. He reached down and offered her a hand. "I don't know what happened here, but I can't do this alone. We need to stick together." She stared at his hand for a long time before slowly reaching out, her fingers brushing against his. For some reason, Ethan couldn't help but feel that this moment would change everything. As she accepted his help and pulled herself to her feet, she looked at him with a small, uncertain smile. Together, then, and in that moment, Ethan knew their fates were somehow intertwined. But what that meant for them both was still unclear. Ethan watched as the alien girl, Lyra, slowly rose to her feet. Her movements were graceful, but there was a hint of unease in her eyes, as if she didn't fully trust her surroundings. Ethan didn't blame her. After all, they were both stranded on a strange planet, surrounded by nothing but the wreckage of his ship and an unfamiliar, dangerous world. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, still holding her hand as she steadied herself. She gave him a small nod, though her expression was distant. "I am better now," she whispered, her voice soft and uncertain. Ethan glanced around at the wreckage, feeling the weight of their situation pressing down on him. The Vanguard was supposed to be a reliable ship, but now it lay scattered across the barren landscape, a twisted metal shell that would never fly again. His heart sank as he realized how alone they truly were. "We need to find shelter," Ethan said after a moment. "It's not safe out here." Lyra nodded again, though she didn't speak. She seemed lost in thought, her eyes scanning the horizon as if she was searching for something. Ethan wondered if she had been on this planet before, but he didn't want to press her for answers just yet. He wasn't sure how much trust there was between them, but he could feel it building, slowly. "Come on," he urged, pulling himself together. "I know we're both hurt, but we can't stay here. There's a cave not far from the crash site. We'll find shelter there." Lyra hesitated for a moment but then followed him. Her steps were light and quiet, almost as if she was trying not to disturb the silence of the planet. Ethan led the way, navigating the jagged terrain as best he could, keeping his eyes open for any signs of danger. As they walked, the wind picked up, howling through the barren landscape. The temperature dropped even more, and Ethan shivered, wishing he had more clothing to keep warm. His suit had been damaged in the crash, and now it felt like it was offering no protection at all. "Are you cold?" Lyra asked quietly, her voice soft but filled with concern. Ethan nodded, rubbing his arms to warm himself. "Yeah, a little, but I'll manage." To his surprise, Lyra stepped closer to him, her body radiating heat. It was strange her warmth wasn't like the warmth of the sun, but more like a steady, gentle heat that seemed to come from deep within her. Without thinking, Ethan moved closer, grateful for the warmth. As they reached the cave, Ethan took a deep breath of relief. The cave was small, but Lyra shook her head, her long hair swaying gently. "No, not exactly. But I could feel your presence. It called to me." She hesitated, as though considering whether to explain further. Finally, she added, I don't trust humans." Ethan blinked in surprise. "You don't trust me?" he asked, though the question stung more than he expected. She met his gaze again, her expression softening. "It's not you," she said. "It's everything. My people were once hunted by your kind. We've been hiding for generations, far from human eyes. Trust doesn't come easily when you've been running for so long." Ethan's heart sank. He hadn't expected this. He understood the fear that came with being hunted, though not in the same way. His species had never been the hunted. They were the hunters, explorers, and conquerors of space. The thought of someone fearing him, simply because of who he was, left him feeling conflicted. "I don't want to hurt you," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "I'm just trying to survive, like you." Lyra studied him for a long time, her dark eyes never leaving his. After a moment, she nodded slowly. "I believe you," she said quietly. The words hung in the air between them, a fragile thread of trust beginning to form. Ethan wasn't sure if it would last or if it would ever grow strong enough to make a real difference. But for now, it was enough. For now, it meant that they could help each other. The cave was quiet again, save for the sound of their breathing and the occasional shift of rocks. Ethan leaned his head back, exhausted but grateful for the brief moment of peace. "Thank you," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan looked over at her, his heart swelling. "For what?" "For trusting me," she replied. "For not turning me away." Ethan smiled. even though he wasn't sure what the future held. He didn't know how long they would be stuck on this planet, or what kind of dangers lay ahead. But for now, he had Lyra by his side, and that was something he never expected. And something, deep down, he was beginning to realize he might need more than anything else. Together, he said softly, "We'll make it out of here, somehow." Lyra gave him a small smile, her eyes shining with something unspoken. Together, she agreed. As they sat there in the cave, the warmth from Lyra's presence seemed to fill the space, offering Ethan a sense of hope that he hadn't felt in a long time. They might be strangers, from two completely different worlds, but in that moment, they were something more, survivors, and maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something more between them, something neither of them had expected. The morning light filtered weakly into the cave, casting long shadows on the rocky walls. Ethan woke up to the sound of Lyra moving beside him. He had fallen asleep sometime during the night, exhausted from the crash and their struggle to find shelter. The warmth from her body had kept him from shivering, though he wasn't sure if it was because of her heat or the trust he felt in her presence. When he opened his eyes, he found Lyra sitting near the entrance of the cave, her back to him, staring out at the vast landscape. Her silver hair shimmered in the soft light, and her eyes seemed focused on something far away, something Ethan couldn't see. He stood up slowly, stretching his stiff muscles. His head still ached from the crash, and his stomach growled with hunger. He hadn't eaten in hours. The wreckage of the ship was scattered around, and he wasn't sure what they could find for food. Lyra seemed to notice his movement and glanced over her shoulder, her dark eyes meeting his. "You're awake," she said quietly, her voice soft but full of warmth. "I thought I might have to wake you." Ethan smiled faintly and moved closer to her. "I was exhausted." "How long have you been up?" "Not long," Lyra answered, her gaze returning to the horizon. "I was thinking about where we are, about us." Ethan's curiosity piqued, but he didn't interrupt her. He sat beside her, feeling the cold stone beneath him. Lyra's presence, though calm, was filled with mystery, and he couldn't help but wonder what had brought her here and what had happened to her people. "You said you were hiding from humans," he said, his voice tentative. "Why? What happened?" Lyra didn't immediately respond. She seemed lost in her thoughts. Finally, after a long pause, she spoke, her voice quieter than before. "Many years ago, my people were hunted by your kind," she said softly. "Humans came to our world, not to explore or to trade, but to capture and take what they wanted. My species was small, fragile, and not ready for what you brought." She looked down at her hands, as if she could still see the memories in her palms. "We were forced to run, to hide. Most of us never made it." Ethan felt a knot form in his chest. He couldn't imagine the fear that Lyra's people must have felt, being hunted by a species they had never encountered before. He had always known about humanity's ambition to go back to the stars. Lyra didn't respond right away. Instead, she seemed to study him closely, as if weighing his words. Finally, she nodded. "I don't know if that's possible," she said softly, "but I trust you, Ethan." Her words felt like a weight lifting off his shoulders. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but having Lyra by his side, even with the mistrust she had toward humans, made him feel like he wasn't completely alone in this strange, hostile place. They sat there for a while, in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Ethan knew he had a lot of work to do if he was going to get the ship functional again. He had no idea how long it would take, but he was determined. If he didn't get off this planet, he and Lyra might never have a chance at survival. After some time, Ethan stood up, brushing the dust from his clothes. "We should start looking for food," he said. "I'm starving." Lyra looked up at him, a faint smile on her face. "I know a place where we can find food. Follow me." She stood up gracefully, and Ethan followed her out of the cave. The cold air hit him immediately, and he pulled his jacket tight around himself. Lyra didn't seem bothered by the chill at all, her skin glowing with a warmth that seemed to defy the temperature. He marveled at how she could withstand such a cold world so effortlessly. As they walked through the rocky landscape, Lyra moved with ease, almost as if she were in her element. Ethan tried to keep up, stumbling over the uneven ground, but Lyra slowed down, making sure he stayed close behind. Her presence, once mysterious and unfamiliar, was now something that Ethan found comfort in. They eventually came to a small grove of plants, strange alien vegetation that Ethan couldn't identify. Lyra knelt down, her hands moving quickly as she plucked something from the ground and handed it to him. "This is edible," she said. "It will give you energy." Ethan took the strange fruit-like object from her, examining it closely. It was a bright green color, unlike anything he'd seen before, but the smell was sweet and inviting. He hesitated for a moment but then bit into it. The taste was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a mix of sweet and tangy that left him craving more. "This is amazing," he said, chewing. "Where did you learn how to find this?" Lyra smiled softly. "I've had to learn a lot in my time. My people know how to survive, even in the hardest places." Ethan nodded, understanding that she was a survivor, just like him. The thought made him feel a little less afraid of the unknowns they were facing. They weren't so different, after all. Both of them were fighting to stay alive, together. They finished the fruit and continued walking. Ethan couldn't help but feel like their journey was just beginning, and with Lyra by his side, he felt like maybe, just maybe, they stood a chance. As the days passed, Ethan and Lyra fell into a routine. Every morning, they would explore the area around the crash site, searching for supplies and food. Ethan worked on fixing his ship, determined to make it fly again, while Lyra seemed to be in her own world, often disappearing for hours into the strange landscape. At first, Ethan was concerned. He didn't know what she was doing out there, alone. But over time, he learned to trust her instincts. She always returned with something: water, fruit, or even strange herbs that seemed to heal the body with just a touch. Ethan wasn't sure how she knew where to find these things, but he didn't question it. Lyra's abilities went far beyond what he understood, and it was clear she had a deep connection with this planet. One evening, as the two of them sat by a small fire, Lyra spoke up, her voice barely louder than the crackling of the flames. "I've been thinking," she began, her eyes flickering in the firelight. "I don't know if I can ever go back to my people." Ethan looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean? You said you were hiding. Is there a way you could go back?" Lyra shook her head slowly, her long silver hair falling over her shoulder. "My people are no longer the same. They've changed because of what happened to them, and now I don't think they would welcome me. I've been running from them for so long, Ethan. I'm not sure I remember who I was before." Ethan didn't know how to respond. He had always thought that survival was the most important thing, that getting away from danger was the only goal. But now, he saw a different side of it, the side where living meant something more than just escaping. "You're not alone," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she spoke again, her voice softer this time. "I never expected to trust anyone again, let alone a human." Ethan's heart skipped a beat at her words. There was something about the way she said it, something raw, something real. It made him feel closer to her than ever before. He wanted to tell her that he understood her, that he, too, had been running from things, from responsibilities, from his past. But the words didn't come. Instead, they just sat there, hanging in the air between them. "I'm glad you do," he finally said, his voice steady. "I don't know what happened to your people, but I'm here. I won't leave you." Lyra smiled faintly, a small, quiet smile that made Ethan's chest tighten. He realized just how much he had come to rely on her, how much he had come to care for her, even though it felt like a dream he wasn't sure would last. The next few days brought more challenges. The ship was still far from being fully repaired. Ethan had managed to get the engine working again, but there were still missing parts he couldn't find on this planet. The weather had turned colder, and the winds grew stronger. It seemed like the planet didn't want them to leave. But Lyra remained unfazed. She was like the planet itself, tough, yet beautiful. Ethan watched as she moved through the days with quiet grace, always calm, always in control. It amazed him how easily she adapted to everything around her. She could find water in places where he saw nothing but dry earth. She could speak to the plants and the animals as though she had always belonged here. Ethan began to wonder if Lyra was part of the planet, or if the planet had become I need to show you something, she said. Her voice serious. Ethan stood up and wiped his hands on his jacket. What is it? Lyra hesitated, then motioned for him to follow. Come with me. They walked through the rocky terrain, moving toward a high plateau that overlooked a wide valley. The sky above was filled with thick clouds, and the air felt heavy with the promise of a storm. When they reached the edge of the plateau, Lyra stopped and pointed toward the valley below. Ethan squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. In the distance, he could just make out the shape of a large structure, something ancient, something not of this world. It looked like a temple, with sharp angles and strange symbols etched into the stone. What is that? Ethan asked, his voice filled with awe. Lyra's gaze never wavered from the structure. It's where I come from, she said softly. It's where my people used to live, before they were destroyed. Ethan's heart sank. He had no idea what to say. He felt like they had just stumbled upon something far bigger than themselves. It was like a hidden chapter in Lyra's life, a piece of her history that she had kept locked away. Why did you bring me here? He asked gently. Lyra turned to him, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of sadness and hope. Because we need to find out what happened, and we need to find a way to heal, to move forward. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. He had always believed that survival was the most important thing, but now, looking at the structure in the distance, he realized that survival was only part of it. They needed answers, and they needed to face whatever was waiting for them. We'll go, Ethan said. Together, Lyra smiled, the faintest hint of relief in her expression. Together. And so, with a new sense of purpose, they turned toward the valley, ready to uncover the secrets that lay hidden beneath the shadows of the past. The journey to the ancient structure was not easy. The landscape grew rougher as they moved closer to the valley. The wind howled, making the air feel even colder, and the ground was uneven, covered with sharp rocks that made walking difficult. Lyra moved with ease, almost as if the harsh conditions didn't bother her at all. Ethan, on the other hand, struggled to keep up, his legs aching with every step. Still, he pushed forward, determined to see this journey through. Lyra had told him that the structure in the valley was part of her past, part of her people's history. She hadn't said much more, but the sadness in her voice when she mentioned it had stayed with him. He had a feeling that whatever lay ahead would change everything. As they approached the base of the valley, the wind began to pick up, making it harder to hear each other. Ethan pulled his jacket tight around himself, wishing for some way to block out the cold. Lyra seemed unaffected, her steps steady and sure, as though she had done this 100 times before. The structure in the distance grew clearer the closer they got. It was massive, much larger than Ethan had initially thought. The walls were made of smooth, dark stone, with strange carvings running along the surface. Some of the carvings were shaped like stars, while others were more abstract, almost like symbols of unknown language. It reminded Ethan of the ruins he'd seen on other planets, ancient civilizations that had long since vanished. When they finally reached the base of the structure, they stopped for a moment to catch their breath. The stone walls loomed above them, casting long shadows in the late afternoon light. What is this place? Ethan asked, looking up at the towering structure. Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked toward a large set of double doors at the front of the structure. The doors were made of the same dark stone, but they had strange symbols etched into them, symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. This is where my people lived, Lyra said softly. This is where everything began, and where it all ended. Ethan could sense the weight of her words. The sadness in her voice was clear, and he wondered what had happened to make her feel so lost. Replied, her voice distant. I never wanted to face this again, but I think I need to. We need to understand what happened. She placed her hand on the door, and the symbols began to glow brighter. As though responding to her touch, Ethan watched in awe as the door slowly began to open, revealing a dark hallway inside. The air inside felt colder than the outside, and a strange sense of stillness hung in the air. Without saying another word, Lyra stepped inside. Ethan hesitated for a moment, but then followed her, his heart racing. The hallway was narrow, and the air was thick with dust. Strange, ancient markings covered the walls, some of them familiar to Ethan, but others were completely foreign. He couldn't understand them, but he felt their power, as if they held the key to something important. As they moved deeper into the structure, Lyra stopped in front of a large chamber. The room was dimly lit by a strange, glowing blue light that seemed to come from nowhere. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on top of it lay what appeared to be an ancient artifact, a small crystal that pulsed with light. "This is it," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with a mix of awe and fear. "This is the heart of my people's history, the thing that we lost." Ethan stepped forward, his eyes locked on the crystal. It was beautiful, its surface smooth and clear, glowing with an inner light, but there was something unsettling about it, something that made him feel uneasy. "Why is it here?" Ethan asked. "What does it do?" Lyra's expression darkened. "This crystal was the source of our power. It was the reason my people thrived. But it also became the reason for our downfall. The humans who came to our world, they wanted this. They took it from us." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't known, but now he understood. The crystal was more than just a symbol of Lyra's people. It was the reason they had been hunted, the reason they had been forced to flee. "I didn't know," Ethan said softly, his voice filled with regret. "I didn't know what had happened. I never thought about the damage we caused." Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and something else, perhaps understanding. "It's not just the humans," she said. "It was greed. My people were so dependent on this power. We didn't see what it was doing to us. It made us weak in ways we couldn't understand until it was too late." Ethan nodded, unsure of what to say. He had never been taught about the consequences of human actions in such a personal way. He had always thought of humans as the explorers, the ones who built empires and conquered the stars. But now, standing here with Lyra, he realized how much damage that ambition could cause. "What happened to the crystal?" he asked quietly. Lyra looked away, her face tight with emotion. "The crystal was lost. After the humans took it, we were scattered. Some of us tried to fight, but we were outmatched. And now, I don't know where it is. I don't know if it's still out there or if it's been destroyed." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, offering whatever comfort he could. "We'll find it," he said firmly. "We'll find the crystal, and we'll make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands again." Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of hope in them. "Do you really think we can?" she asked softly. "I do," Ethan said, his voice filled with determination. "We're not alone in this anymore. We've got each other." Lyra nodded slowly, the faintest smile appearing on her lips. "Together, then," she said, and with that, the two of them stood in the ancient chamber, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew they would face it together. The days following their discovery in the ancient structure were filled with a new sense of urgency. Ethan and Lyra now had a goal. They had to find the crystal, the heart of Lyra's people's history, before it fell into the wrong hands. Ethan felt the weight of their mission more deeply than ever, but the determination in Lyra's eyes kept him moving forward. They were in this together, and they would succeed together. The landscape outside the structure seemed to mock their sense of urgency. The weather had turned colder, and the winds howled as if warning them. But Lyra seemed undeterred. Her ability to read the land, to find what they needed to survive, was nothing short of remarkable. She always knew where to find food, where to find shelter. Ethan had started to rely on her more and more. In a way, she had become his guide, not just through the planet, but through a world of understanding he had never known. One evening, as they sat by their small fire, the shadows from the cave walls stretching long in the dim light, Lyra spoke again. Her voice was softer than usual. as if the weight of their mission had settled in her heart. "I've been thinking," she began, looking down at the fire, "about the crystal, and about my people. When I was young, I never thought about what it meant to lose everything. I just assumed we would survive, that there was always going to be someone to help us. But now I see," she paused, as though struggling to find the words, "I see that the crystal was not just a source of power, it was a symbol of everything we were. In losing it, it broke us in ways we never imagined." Ethan listened carefully, his eyes fixed on her. He had always known there was more to Lyra's past than she had shared, and now he was beginning to understand the depth of the loss she carried with her. "You don't have to carry that weight alone," Ethan said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. "We'll find it. We'll bring it back." Lyra met his gaze, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "I hope so," she whispered, her voice filled with something close to hope, but tinged with doubt. The next morning, after a cold and restless night, they continued their journey. The path to the crystal's last known location wasn't easy. The planet was full of obstacles, rocky cliffs, deep ravines, and dangerous wildlife that lurked in the shadows. But with each step they took, Ethan noticed something strange happening within himself. The fear that had gripped him in the early days of their crash had started to fade. He felt stronger, more capable, and a lot of that strength came from Lyra. Her confidence, her calm in the face of uncertainty, had become a source of strength for him. Every time he felt overwhelmed by the harsh conditions or the danger they were facing, he would glance at her. She seemed unshaken, her resolve as strong as the planet itself. She had become more than a survivor to him, she had become his partner in a way he hadn't experienced before. After a long day of travel, they reached a clearing just as the sun began to set. The air was still, and the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink. Lyra stopped, her eyes scanning the horizon, as though she was waiting for something. Ethan followed her gaze but saw nothing but the distant peaks of the mountains. In the distance, "What are you looking for?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. "There," Lyra said quietly, pointing to a small ridge on the far side of the clearing. "We're close. The crystal is beyond that ridge. I can feel it." Ethan felt a surge of excitement mixed with uncertainty. They were so close, yet so far. He had no idea what they would find when they reached the other side, but he knew one thing for sure: they couldn't turn back now. They made their way toward the ridge, and as they approached, Lyra's pace quickened. Her eyes were locked on the distant peak, and she seemed to be leading the way without hesitation. Ethan followed closely, his mind focused on the mission. He had to admit, there was something about Lyra that made him believe in their success. She had an energy, a drive that was infectious. And even though he still didn't fully understand her people, he was beginning to understand her. She was resilient. She was strong. They reached the ridge just as darkness began to fall. The temperature dropped sharply, and Ethan shivered, pulling his jacket tight around him. Lyra didn't seem to mind the cold. Her eyes were bright with determination as she scanned the area ahead. "We're almost there," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. Ethan's heart raced. He felt as if they were on the verge of something monumental, something that could change everything. Lyra had told him about the crystal's power, about how it had been the heart of her people's civilization. It had been the source of their strength, their connection to each other and to the universe, and now it was the key to their future. Lyra stepped forward, her feet sure as she moved toward a small cave nestled beneath the ridge. The entrance was barely visible in the fading light, hidden by overgrown vines and rocks. Ethan followed her inside, his heart pounding with anticipation. The cave was dark, but Lyra's presence seemed to light the way. She moved ahead, her form glowing faintly as if the very air around her responded to her energy. Ethan followed closely, unsure of what they would find inside. But when they reached the center of the cave, he froze. There, on a pedestal made of stone, lay the crystal. It was exactly as Lyra had described, glowing softly, pulsing with an inner light. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, and for a moment, Ethan felt as though time had stopped. "This is it," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible, the heart of everything, the last piece of my people's history. Ethan approached slowly, his hand reaching out toward the crystal. But as his fingers brushed the surface, a sudden tremor ran through the ground. The walls of the cave shook, and a low rumble filled the air. "Get back!" Lara cried out, grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him away from the pedestal. Ethan stumbled, his heart racing. Something was wrong. The ground trembled again, this time more violently, as if the planet itself was waking up. "Lyra, what's happening?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with alarm. "I don't know," Lyra said, her voice tense. "But we need to leave. Now." Before Ethan could respond, the cave entrance began to close, rocks falling from above. The tremors continued, and Ethan realized they were running out of time. "Run!" Lyra shouted, pulling him toward the back of the cave. Together, they dashed toward the exit, the ground shaking beneath them. Ethan's mind raced. What had they awakened? And would they make it out in time? The tremors were growing stronger. Ethan could feel the ground beneath him shake with each passing moment, as if the entire planet was coming to life. The cave walls were crumbling, and the ceiling above them seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Rocks tumbled from above, blocking their escape path, and the air grew thick with dust. "Keep moving," Lyra shouted, pulling Ethan forward as the cave continued to tremble. Her grip on his arm was strong, determined. She wasn't just leading them to safety, she was pushing him to survive. She had to. For both of them, Ethan followed her, adrenaline pumping through his veins. His heart raced with fear and urgency. He couldn't see the way forward clearly. The dust and debris made it hard to breathe, but Lyra seemed to know where she was going. She moved with confidence, her steps quick and precise as she guided them deeper into the cave. "Where are we going?" Ethan gasped, struggling to catch. "Up, towards the back," Lyra called back, her voice firm despite the chaos around them. "There's a tunnel. It leads outside." Ethan nodded, trusting her completely now. He couldn't let fear take over, not when she was relying on him. But even as they pushed forward, the tremors grew more violent. He could hear the cave groaning, as though it was alive, shifting, and reacting to the disturbance caused by their presence. Suddenly, a massive chunk of rock fell from the ceiling, crashing down just in front of them. Ethan stumbled back, barely avoiding the falling debris. Lyra grabbed him by the arm, pulling him away from the collapsing rocks. "Come on," she urged, her voice urgent. They turned and ran, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls as they sped through the tunnel Lyra had mentioned. It was narrow, but the path ahead seemed clear, and the further they went, the less the tremors affected them. The sound of the earth shaking behind them grew quieter, but the danger was far from over. Ethan could feel the tension in the air, a sense of something huge, something powerful, shifting beneath them. It wasn't just the cave collapsing, it was as if the planet itself was rejecting their presence, as if they had disturbed something ancient and dangerous. Finally, after what felt like hours of running, they reached the end of the tunnel. Lyra stopped at the entrance and peered outside. The daylight outside was dim, the sky still filled with dark clouds from the storm, but the air felt fresher, and for the first time, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. "We're almost out," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. But before they could step outside, a loud crack echoed through the tunnel. A massive rock, loosened by the tremors, fell and blocked the exit. Lyra slammed her fist against the stone, frustration and fear flooding her face. "Come on," Ethan shouted, rushing toward the pile of rocks. "We can get it out of the way, together." They pushed and pulled, trying to move the massive stones blocking their path. The rocks were heavy, but their determination was stronger. Sweat streamed down their faces as they worked in silence, both of them focused on clearing the way. It felt like their only chance, like the last thread of hope was tied to this moment finally. After what seemed like an eternity, the last rock shifted, and the path to freedom was clear. Lyra was the first to step through, and Ethan followed closely behind, his chest heaving from the effort. The cool air outside felt like a blessing. For a moment, they stood in the open, surrounded by the vastness of the planet's landscape. The storm had passed, and the land stretched out before them, dark and mysterious, but alive with possibility. Ethan turned to Lyra, his breath still heavy. Are we safe? She looked out at the horizon, her expression unreadable. For now, she said quietly, but the danger isn't over. We've awoken something here, something we don't fully understand. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with concern. What do we do now? Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. We have to keep moving. The crystal is too important. We can't let it fall into the wrong hands. The planet's reaction wasn't just an accident, it's trying to protect itself, protect the crystal. Ethan felt a wave of understanding wash over him. They had awakened something ancient, something tied to the very heart of Lyra's people. The crystal wasn't just a source of power, it was a part of this planet's life force. And it wasn't going to give up easily. We can't stay here, Ethan said, his voice firm. We need to keep going. We'll find the crystal, and we'll make sure it's safe. Lyra nodded, her face determined. Agreed. We have to keep moving forward. The crystal is part of my people's future. If we don't find it, everything we've been through will have been for nothing. Ethan glanced at the sky, where the storm clouds had finally begun to part, revealing the first signs of stars. The night felt cold, but there was something about it, something beautiful about the way the stars seemed to watch over them. He turned to Lyra, his heart heavy with the weight of their mission. We'll find it, together. Lyra looked at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Together. With that, they set off into the night. The dark landscape ahead of them, the road would be long, and the dangers would only grow greater. But Ethan knew one thing for sure: he wasn't alone anymore. With Lyra by his side, they could face whatever came their way. And as the stars sparkled above them, Ethan felt a sense of peace settle in his chest. No matter what the future held, they had each other, and together they would see it through to the end.